Okay, good evening, everyone, and sorry for my late start. I just needed to get back into this again. So we're working our way basically down the Amud and looking at the Machlokas Rava and Abaya in understanding the unraveling of the Gezeiras of Nechemia. Interference here, just muted everyone. And the Gemara, we right near the end of last year rushed a little bit through the stage in which the Gemara Rava wants to make a chiluk between Shnei Bnei Adam and one person. We saw, I think this is universally agreed upon, that Shnei Bnei Adam doesn't mean whether two people happen to be holding it, one person happens to be holding it, but it means whether it's holdable by one person alone or necessarily two people. We saw that the svara of the chiluk, the Rashba says that the svara is that a person is more likely to be Muktza midato, not to have intention to use something that needs two people to use because it's harder to use, whereas something which one person can lift alone is more omeid for hishtamshus. In which case, the Rashba is understanding that this suggestion of the Gemara to make a chiluk between Shnei Bnei Adam and one person is not a svara in Nechemia, but it's a svara in Muktza. So again, just what we saw in the Sugya is that Nechemia makes the Gezeiras Kelim irrespective of how muchen the Kelim are for use. It's not really, we label it Muktza, it's not really a Halacha of Muktza, it's just a Halacha of Gezeiras Kelim. But when we make the chiluk between Shnei Bnei Adam and one person, the chiluk is not a distinction of in the Gezeira of Nechemia, but a distinction in Hilchos Muktza, that something that is only usable by two people lifting together is less usable and therefore more likely to be Muktza. That was the svara of that's how the Rashba understood the svara.
And within a fire where there's a chiluk between one hand and two hands, what would that chiluk be?
It also difficult. I don't know. It's somewhat easier to use. More muchen. I don't know if anyone got any better than that in this sugya. I struggle to understand it. And did anyone have any svaras in that? I don't know. Yeah.
I don't understand why you're saying it's not really the family when that was part of the Gezeiras that actually only went back on it.
I'm saying this, but I'm bothered like you are a little bit about this. The simplest understanding is that Nechemia forbade all Kelim, and gradually they unraveled the Gezeira of Nechemia. I thought for reasons, internal reasons within the sort of logic of Nechemia. But according to the Rashba, you see not like that, because the reason they only unraveled the Gezeira from a Keli that can be used by a single person, but not from a Keli that can only be used by two people, isn't because of a logic in Nechemia, but because of a logic in Hilchos Muktza. Again, Nechemia says that all Kelim are Asa, right? Or almost all Kelim are Asa, besides very frequent ones, whatever. There's not a logic of Hachona, Kelim or Muchan. He just said don't use Kelim because I want people to step back as much as possible from activity in any type of utensil type activity in order to avoid melacha. We don't have such a halacha, or if we've got any remnants of Nechemia, it's very, very limited. What do we have? We have a separate type of takana, which is around Muktza, which is to do with how muchen something, which is around hachana on Shabbos. The chiluk between Shnei Bnei Adam and one person is that a chiluk in Hilchos Muktza or a chiluk in Nechemia's logic. The Rashba seems to understand it's a chiluk in Hilchos Muktza. The reason why there was a stage where they left the prohibition of Nechemia with a Keli that can only be used by two people was not because of a svarin in Kelim, but because of a svarin in Hachana and how muchen such a Keli is.
Stages in the unraveling, isn't that very much parallel or the same as the Muktza?
I don't know though if they're Muktza svaras or not. I'm not sure. I mean, you could learn them as Nechemia svaras, as far as in Kelim rather than as far as in Muktza. Is the chiluk, for example, between Tlisha Nacht and Issa and a regular Chili because of Hachana, or is it a remnant of Nechemia because of bringing you closer to doing Melacha? I know. I mean, in Halacha L'maisa now, we've unraveled Nechemia. It's a Hachana type Halacha. Is it possible that Kli, that Muksmach Maskasor and Kiss remains with the reasoning of Nechemia, that it was never unraveled from that? That's also possible. And we discussed in previous weeks some perhaps nafka minas that emerged from some of this. Yeah.
So the logic that the Russians bringing
could that apply pre-Nechemia as well? Someone would, if Kelim needed more than one person, inherently, Muktza existed before Nechemia, but not to the same extent that parents. Well, it was, so I have before then, even then.
It could be. I'm not asking a historical question. I'm asking I'm not even really asking a question. I'm making a conceptual point that the chiluk between shtei Yadayim between shtei bnei Adam and one person is not, as far as the Rashba seems to say it, is not a svara of a chiluk in Kelim. It's a svara in Hachana, in Haktar. Whether that existed around the time of Nechemia or not is a historical question. But in Lomdus, in concept, the logic of a difference. Why would there be a difference between? Why would a keli that can only be used by two people be prohibited and a keli that can be used by one person be allowed? Is it because of a svara in Kelim, which is the Gezeiras of Nechemia, or is it a svara in Hachana, which is what we call Muktza? The Rashba says a svara in Haktar. That's the language of the Rashba. Yes.
So if the buyer thought that was always the case, pre-Nechemia.
It may be true that that's the case pre-Nechemia, but I'm just saying a buyer's svara is not a svara is not a distinction in Nechemia. It's a distinction in Hilchos Muktza. Fine.
Because for him, two people who never would have even after everything's unraveling.
Right. So it turns out that unraveling is not a svara it's not they unravel Nechemia this far but not this far. It's that there's a different halacha that's relevant over here. It's not a knockout question. I'm just saying it's a bit messy. That's all. When I read the Gemara first glance, and I still there's a part of me that wants to read it this way, I understood they're gradually chipping away from the Gezeiras of Nechemia. It now turns out that it's not that they didn't chip away from the Gezeiras of Nechemia, a keli that's used by Shnei B'nei Adam. It's that as far as Nechemia is concerned, there's no difference between whether it's used by Shnei B'nei Adam or one person. It's that it happens to be another thing going on over here, which is it's not mukhan. It's a bit funny in the flow of the Gemara. That's all. No, it's not. It's not a question. It's just it's a little sensitivity to the language, to the flow. Is anyone with me in this, or yeah?
I'm still grappling with the idea that Nechemia's Gezeira, when he made it, was it? You're saying probably nothing to do with Muktza. But was he making a Gezeira to make people more Shabbat observant, or is it making them a Gezeira to make them more Muktza observant, but going to an extreme which had never been there before?
I can only argue. I can only show you Rashi and other Rishonim who don't believe that it's a Muktza type. So it's got nothing to do with Achana. They say the reason is to keep people away from engagement of Melacha. Number one. And number two, logically, it doesn't seem it can possibly have anything to do with Hachana. How can it be that a keli that's used the whole time, a chair, has Muktza associated with it? It's ridiculous.
Well, no, just because as a Gezeira of the Muktza to make you.
Okay, there's not how the Rishonim understands it, and in logic, it doesn't seem to be how Muktza works. Muktza is a Hachana svara. This isn't anything to do with Hachana. So both logically speaking, it's not a svara in Hachana. And it's not how the Rishonim understand Nechemia. They say Nechemia is a rule on Kelim, irrespective of Hachana. And what we call Muktza is a star of Haktar, of what something is omid, what Shamshus is omid for. Okay, so that's just what I wanted to bring out the Rashba. The other point, the other reason I printed the Rashba was just because the Rashba assumes that Abaye and Rava argue that Abaye holds anything which a person that is Einu Nittel Ba'adam Echad Adam Muktza Midatei, and Rava says that Afidu B'Shnei B'nei Adam you're not Muktza Midatei, and he learns this is a machlokus Rava and Abaye, and the Ran I printed the Chiddushei Ran Yochasim brings in the name of the Ra'ah that the Ra'ah doesn't think this is machlokus, and I discussed last time, I think, a little bit of the history of the Ra'ah and Rashba living in the same town and arguing. Again, I couldn't really work out what they're arguing over. I'm not quite sure what the basis of this machlokus would be. It's also a bit funny why Rav and Abaye would argue over this point. It seems to be a separate machlokus to their main machlokus. Normally, it's nice when you see Rav and Abaye arguing, if there's one point of disputes between them, out of which emerges all perhaps 5 halachic distinctions. It's nice if we understand what's at the core of how Rava is reading the Rishona and how Abai is reading the Rishona. Whereas this debate seems to be a complete aside to it. It just seems a tangential disagreement. I don't know why they would argue over that, what that involves in. So, I don't know.
Which is obviously them agreeing, but I wasn't quite sure the translation.
So, where are you reading from?
Last paragraph of the Ram. The Rava, the Mash Mishum to the Tafi Multi.
Fidim Shnei Adam. Kosovo. Yeah. Mashma Deleplik Abai Rava Bahachin. And the Rava Mishum to Tafi Milsa Osi Mitvi Nami Baha. Since he's mentioning things, he also mentions this. It's like the verb of tefei, of addition. Yeah, it's more. It's adding on.
So basically, they're not arguing just as he's doing things.
So he throws in all the other distinctions that are all the other points that are relevant. Yeah, he's adding in additional details. He's coming in to add in. Correct. That's what they're always saying. Yeah. Okay, so that's more or less it just ties up what I wanted to say last time, and we rushed a little bit at the end. I would like to just try and read the next stage of the Gemara for today. Eisvei Abaya, Meducha, Im Yesh Bashum Metaltanosa, Im Lav Ein Metaltanosa. Hopefully, this is familiar to everyone from a little bit of Chazara from Kaf Gimel Amud Aleph. So Rashi and Tosfos explain so Abai is asking a question from here on Rava, and he asks a question that the Meducha, if it doesn't have shum in it, ein metalton in Osa. So what is it? It's a kli shemlachta le'isa, and ein metalton in Osa. You can't move it. So why can you not move it? So Abai says, Bishloim meliditi, according to me, ein metalton means you can't move it l'tzorech makomo. There is some limit on your ability to move it. But according to you, ein metalton Osa, you can always move it, because you can even move it to the l'tzorech makomo. As you hold that a kli shemlachta le'isa is mutzah l'tzorech gufa and l'tzorech makomo, and therefore, what do you mean ein metalton? So kli shemlachta le'isa, you can be metalton either l'tzorech gufa or l'tzorech makomo. Whereas according to me, ein metalton means at least l'tzorech makomo ein metalton. So this is how they ask, and then Tosfos adds in that they could have answered that anyway. We established that this brisa is going like Reb Nechemia, not Nechemia, but like Reb Nechemia, and like the Gemara said earlier, because on Kufchaf Gimel Amud Aleph, the Gemara brought a viewer from Nechemia who says ein kli nitzel ela l'tzorech tashmishay. You can only move a kli for its primary tashmish. In other words, you can't use a kli shemlachta le'isa even for tzorech gufay. He holds you can't even move it tzorech gufay. So that would be an answer that Rava could respond to Abaya. What do you mean? You and me are both allowing. You're allowing the tzorech gufa, but not the tzorech makomo. I'm allowing the tzorech gufa and the tzorech makomo. But all of that is assuming that a kli can be moved, not the tzorech tashmishay. But even you agree that there is an opinion of Rabbi Nechemia who holds that a kli can't even move the tzorech gufa, and that's who this brisa is going like. That's who the member of Ducha is going like, which is what the Gemara suggested earlier as a possibility. So that's what he could have answered. That's basically a summary of Rashi and Tosfos and Sugya. What I want to do is just learn through the Rashba on the Sugya, because it should be apparent to everyone that this is what's going on here is a little bit of a problem, really, because you have a brisa that says Meducha shel shum ein metalton, you can't move it. It's not as if the brisa is glorious like Abaya either, because Abaya says you can't move it l'tzorech makomo, but the brisa is ein metalton, you can't move it. And what it turns out the brisa really means is you can't move it l'tzorech makomo, but you can move it l'tzorech gufay. So it's not a great reading in the brisa. And the truth is, if you really want push to come to shove, I suppose technically we could say ein metalton in osai means you can't move it shelo l'tzorech gufa or l'tzorech makomo. You can't move it mechama letzel, which is where things go. So it just turns out that everyone agrees that ein metalton is not a universal principle. It's just how much ein metalton means. So it's not as if Abaya is in a much better off state than Rava. So this is really the question that the Rashba asks. It's Abaya, Matuchim Yesh Bashum Metalton Nosim Navi Metalton. To merely, Michael Mosim Mina Abaya Rava. What's Abaya asking Rava? To Halu Dudei Nami, Al Kachin Ein Metalton Nosim Katani, Hanu Serch Makomer, Yavel Serch Gufa Metalton Nosim. It's not as if he can explain Ein Metalton Nosim so wonderfully. He also has to fetch Ein Metalton to mean in one way you can't. Some Ein Metalton turns out not to be a principle. It doesn't mean Ein Metalton. It means sometimes you can't be Metalton and sometimes you can. It's very interesting, Rashba, just because what he tells us about Derech HaLimud and how to learn a Gemara. Since Abaya holds you can't, Abaya holds that in Metalton knows a klal mashma, that the words in Metalton means you can never move it. And therefore he asked in Rava from it, maybe Rava has some clever answer that he's missed over here. So Abaya is saying, I recognize you can answer my question by doing a bit of a kvetch and saying Ein Metaltonin means in some cases yeah, in some cases not. But I still think it's worthwhile to ask you the question in case you have some chiluk that I'm missing over here to explain to me why Meducha Shel Shum is a different halacha, and maybe even Abaya wants to hear Rava's clever answer to the question because Abaya is also conscious that even according to him, he hasn't got the greatest reading of the brisa. So basically, when he's attacking Rava with this, what he's really looking for is, have I missed something? Is there some reason why Meducha Shel Shum is different to everyone else, or that this Bryce was going like some other opinion that I haven't spotted, or something like that? Because according to you, you're in a really bad mess. I'm also in a bit of a mess. I'd be interested to hear how you answer the question, because maybe that will get me out of my poor reading also. Very interesting style, yeah.
Your answer is
So he didn't get his Piruka Chadata. He didn't get his sharp answer. But he was hopeful to get a sharp answer. So basically, the Rashba's learning, Abai says to Rava, according to me, it's a poor reading of the Brisa. According to you, it's a very poor reading of the Brisa. Have you got any solutions to get us out of this mess, which will also help me? And Rava answers him, no, I'll leave it with my very poor reading of the Brisa. That's how the Rashba learns the further Gemara. Yeah. Because he's saying that Abaya it's only a matter of degree between Abaya and Rava. Both of them understand that Ein Metaltonin doesn't mean a Brisa which seems to say Ein Metaltonin as a general rule turns out not really to mean that. It means yeah, sometimes in this case, yeah, in that case not. So both of them have to come onto kvetches of Ein Metaltonin here, not Ein Metaltonin there. So how much better off is Abaya than Rava? It's not really a strong question that Abaya has against Rava. Correct, that's what he's saying. He's saying it's a weak question because Rava can turn back to him and say, and according to you, is it such a great price? It's also not a great pricer. Yeah.
But it does just seem so clear that it can be done. Holds a very different shape.
So that's Tosis's point really. But you should be aware that taking a stum brisa and establishing it like Reb Nechemia is not a great move either, because it's a stum brisa, especially when Nechemia is shalok halacha. So an anonymous brisa anyway, saying a brisa just ascribed anonymously is going like one Tanoitic opinion is not very good, and especially if that Tanoitic opinion is ruled out of halacha l'maisa, so it's also not such a good solution. So the Rashba says really all Abaya is doing in this question is trying to prod Rava into, is there any better direction we can go in what turns out to be a bit of a messy brisa?
really amazing.
That's what the Rashba was saying. Yeah, it's interesting. Interesting. Yeah. It's an ace in the sense that he asked him the question, but he realised that it wasn't a particularly strong question and wanted to see if there was a better answer that emerged. That's the first answer he gives. The second answer he gives, I just want us to cheshbon out according to the Rashba, just because it leads us into other important avenues, which is that the Rashba ties this into a debate elsewhere whether a clear shemelachot l'issa is mutter l'tzorech makomoi according to Nechemia. Very, very interesting. Nechemia said that a keli is only omed for its own use. That means a clear shemelachot l'issa cannot be used as tzorech kufay. That's from Nechemia. Rabbi Nechemia, correct? Can it be moved l'tzorech makomoi? So here you have a reminder of how careful one has to be in one's thinking. In our sugya, we see that the tzorech gufay is more of a heter than a tzorech makomoi, because Rava holds because Abaya holds that L'Tzorech Gufay is, Rava holds that L'Tzorech Gufay is Muktza, sorry, in our Gemara you see that the Tzorech Gufay has more of a reason to allow it than Tzorech Mekomai, because it's possible that Tzorech Gufay is allowed and Tzorech Mekomai isn't allowed. You may be tempted from that to think that there's an algorithm, a formula that can always be applied unthinkingly, that Tzorech Mekomai is always, that Tzorech Gufay is always more allowed than Tzorech Mekomai. The Rashba points out that this isn't necessarily the case. Nechemia says a keli can't be used for any other hishtamshus, and therefore he says kelim are only for their hishtamshus, and therefore it's also l'tzorech gufay. But that doesn't tell us what he would say about tzorech mekomai. Maybe he would agree with the logic of the tzorech mekomai. At the end of the day, this isn't a stone; it is a keli, and if it can be moved, l'tzorech mekomai, and therefore it's possible that according to Nechemia, he would agree. If you hold that the tzorech mekomai is allowed according to us, you would also hold that Nechemia would allow the tzorech mekomai. Whereas if you hold the tzorech mekomai isn't allowed according to us, then Nechemia obviously wouldn't allow tzorech mekomai, in which case you're left without tzorech gufay or tzorech mekomai. So the Rashba basically says that this would explain Abaya's question. Abaya says, according to me, who holds that klishim lachtel issa is also the tzorech mekomai, according to the Rabbanon, according to Rabbi Nechemia, it's never mutter. It's also completely. It's not mutter l'tzorech gufay, and it's not mutter l'tzorech mekomai. But according to you, Rava, who allows l'tzorech mekomai, who allows l'tzorech mekomai, according to the Rabbanon, you should also allow it according to Rabbi Nechemia. In which case, Rabbi Nechemia was told it's also l'tzorech gufay, but it's mutter l'tzorech mekomai. That's the Rashba's logic over here. And the reason I'm interested in this is both in terms of mathematically calculating the Gemara in an important Rashba, but secondly because it turns out that Rabbi Nechemia, who holds that the klishim lachtel issa isn't allowed to tzorech mekomai, because there's a kli is designed for its use. A pen is designed to be used as a pen. It's not designed to be used as a back scratcher. It's not made for any other ishtamshus. But he would agree. Why shouldn't it be moved to tzorech mekomai with respect to that logic? Why should he disagree? And therefore, Rabbi Nechemia would agree to that logic. So Abaya turns to Rava and he says as follows: according to me, I think the Rabbanon never allowed the tzorech mekomai. The tzorech mekomai is worse than the tzorech gufay. So the gufay is a good heter, tzorech mekomai not. In which case, according to Rabbi Nechemia, who doesn't hold the tzorech gufay, ein metalton klal, you can never use it because it's not allowed the tzorech gufay because he doesn't hold the tzorech gufay. It's not allowed the tzorech mekomai because no one holds the tzorech mekomai. But according to you, Rava, who holds that the tzorech mekomai is a heter, Rabbi Nechemia should also agree to that heter. He doesn't hold the tzorech gufay, but he holds of the tzorech mekomai. That's the logic of the Rashba in his very beautiful second answer. So he says the Bryce is going like from Nechemia, and ein metalton in klal, Abaya says, and therefore I've resolved my question. I've got a beautiful Bryce, ein metalton in klal, but you, Rava, in a mess because even according to Nechemia, it's not ein metalton in klal. That's the Rashba reading. The final answer that the Rashba gives is also an interesting answer, just for those who are interested in how Gemara works. It's always a question when the Gemara arranges a conversation between Amoraim as to whether the Gemara is saying this conversation actually took place, or the Gemara is structuring a conversation in which each side is working out its views and bringing all the rides against each other. So did Abaya actually ask this question, or is the anonymous editor of the Gemara cutting and pasting a previous discussion in order to ask this question over here? And the final answer to the Rashba is that it's not that Abaya actually asked Rava on both cases this question, because he didn't always ask him this question. He only ever brought this brisa once, and the Gemara is simply cheshboning out and in a sense retracing its thinking, the same conversation as it had previously over there. And his final words on the conclusion of the Rashba: it's not that Abaya and Rava asked both times. He's not always asking him from this brisa of the Ducha. And it's the anonymous editor of the Gemara who is lining up a parallel conversation in both sugyas. But in both sugyas, and if we go like we can say the same answer, which we can say the price is going like with Nechemia and avoid the whole question. There's also which incidentally is where the real discussion is about how far Nechemia goes and whether he agrees to thing. Yes, correct.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, or piggybacking on that sukkah. That's correct. Yes, yes, that's correct. Yes, yes,
Can I
yeah.
just ask on that
Yes.
second opinion of the Rav, or answer of the Rav,
The third answer really. The Rav gives three answers now.
That's a good
Yeah,
back one.
but yes.
Second one said, that within Rava there might be, that Rava might hold that there's a difference between Gufa and Makoma, and that sometimes Makoma is even
Yes.
less of a heter, I suppose, than the. But actually, his exact words were Mali the Torah Gufa, Mami the Torah Makoma. He seems to imply that they're absolutely parallel and synonymous and the same. It doesn't make, and the reason for allowing one is the same as the reason for allowing the other.
He is saying that according to me, that a kedi is a kedi is a kedi, and Klisha Malachta Issa is a kedi, even though its primary purpose is Muktza, it doesn't make sense to make a chiluk between Sorokuf and Sorok Makomai. But if we're in Nechemia's universe, where Klisha Malachta Issa is only used for its use, we'd have to think again. In other words, he's saying, according to us, the Rabbanon of Rabbi Nechemia, who hold that Klisha Malachta Issa is still a kedi, and kedim are omeid for all uses, in which case, why should there be a difference between Sorokuf and Sorok Makomai? And they're both b'mutar, in which case, even Nechemia, who utters Sorok Gufa, would allow Sorok Makomai.
Would you say Makoma was always touch mishon? Would you say Makoma was another form of touch mishon?
That's what Nechemia would say. Yes, that's a nice way of putting it. Thank you. Yes, that's a nice way of putting it. Nechemia says you can only move a keli to Sorok Tashmisha. That means you can't move a pen to act as a door stopper. But Makoma isn't Nechemia's logic wouldn't disregard. It's okay. It's keli has a functionality, but part of kelim uses to move them out of the way. Yeah, you could say that like that. The Nechemia would say this includes them within Tashmisha. Thank you. Yeah, yeah.
You able just to read the second answer inside?
Yes, yeah, sorry, yes, yeah. So Abai says it means you can't move it at all. It works according to me that I hold that the Sorech Makom is not called the Sorech. And if it comes out of that, to Rabbi Nechemia, that according to Rabbi Nechemia, even whether melachta le'issa or melachta leheta, you can't move it le'tzorech makomai. And mokminon, because he said you can only move a keli le'tzorech tashmishai, therefore mokminon la le'metucha k'Rab Nechemia or k'doku l'Rabba le'el, and therefore we can say it's going like Reb Nechemia, like Rabba said earlier, and therefore the tzorech gufay is asa because it's kli melachta le'issa. The tzorech makomai is asa because I hold that the tzorech makomai is never enough of a tzorech. Yeah. So again, are you with me? According to me, Abaya, that the Sorech Makomai is not defined as a Sorech. We don't call it a Sorech. Then it's good because it comes out from that according to Rabbi Nechemia, who I keep on talking about Rabbi Nechemia talking about Klisha Malachta Issa, but he even goes more extreme than that. He says even a Klisha Malachta Leheta you can only use for its main purpose. So I feel Klisha Malachta Issa, the Sorech Makomai, no, you wouldn't be able to move it to Sorech Makomai because Sorech Makomai is not called a Sorech. And therefore, I can establish the brisa of meducha like Nechemia because like Rabbi said earlier, and therefore im lav ein metaltalin means ein metaltalin klal. You can't move it at all. According to you, that you put the two together. How would you establish it? Even though we're not now going, he doesn't mention anywhere Reb Nechemia. We can derive this out of their machlokas in order to establish the brisa. That's what he says. Okay. Is the Ritzvah clearer? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. 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 You can look at the Ritzvah where it's a little clearer. So I think that's that one. Okay. So we'll stop here, and we'll move on to the next figure.